Welcome back to Graveyard Graham's Midnight Ride. I'm on my way to work because this is my life now. It is Movie Monday. We're turning the clocks back to 2004, quote-unquote my lost year in cinema, because I was overseas the entire time and didn't get into the theaters. I, Robot was one of the summer movies that year, starring Will Smith and, a pretty loaded cast, not necessarily all around. It didn't have what I would call A-listers outside of Smith, but they were all names that you recognized and tended to be in things that you liked. Bruce Greenwood was in it. He played the head of USR, the robot company. Chi McBride was the chief of police. Bridget Moynihan was the robot psychologist character. And James Cromwell was one of the original designers of the robots. He even famously wrote the 3 Laws. Before I talk about the movie more than that, though, I wanted to compare it to the book to give you some context on what some of the biggest differences are between the text and the what ultimately became the screenplay. There were 3 credited writers on it. One of them was obviously Asimov, because they were playing in his sandbox. The big name that I noticed on that list, though, was Akiva Goldsmith? Akiva. I've seen the name Akiva before. I looked up this stuff online a while back, and now that I'm driving, I'm not looking at my phone. But a significant point that needs to be emphasized is when you watch this movie and you get to the end credits, it says that it was suggested by Isaac Asimov's I, Robot. It wasn't adapted straight from it. That's because the book, in a lot of ways, is an anthology. The main character is Susan Calvin, the female robot psychologist who in the movie was played by Bridget Moynihan. Smith's character, Del Spooner, did not exist in the books. He was created from whole cloth. So, I thought in a supreme twist of irony, you've got all of the major diehard Tolkien fans pointing out the fact that the Tauriel character in the Hobbit sequels was not a canonical Tolkien character, but all the Riri types on the internet are defending it because female representation or whatever, and if more of them were the type to read Asimov and to read old classic sci-fi, they might have noticed that this female protagonist in the book was downgraded in her story and replaced by a made-up male character. But nobody cared because, in my opinion, I, Robot was a book that they were familiar with. It was kind of foundational, haha, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, in mid-20th century science fiction. But it wasn't one that people were aggressively passionate about. And I haven't read a whole lot of other Asimov books to compare it to. I mainly read this book because I had enjoyed the movie. And I saw the movie first. Asimov was the name that I recognized. And then I went and read the book, and I was like, oh, this is quite different. We start the book at the end of Susan Calvin's career, and she's meeting with an interviewer. I can't remember if it's a journalist or something, who's asking her about her most unique and challenging cases. She's very well versed in the 3 laws of robotics. A robot has to obey human orders. A robot cannot harm a human or allow another human to come to harm through inaction, etc., etc. It's an interesting exercise in coding and programming where you see that the robots are given 3 values that they have to abide by. They can only satisfy them as long as they do not come in conflict with the first and second law. And then you now have a framework for stress testing it and seeing what the loopholes might be. And she's recounting different cases in her career where they encountered loopholes. One of them that I remember is, this is another thing that's drastically different from the setting of the book versus the setting of the movie. In the book, we've already achieved space travel. We've started setting up bases on the moon, on asteroids, on space stations, and even on planets like Mercury and Venus. And on one of these little space outposts on Venus, the astronauts are they're in a critical situation. There's something that's going to melt on their outpost, and they need to go out and recover some important resources from a pool, but they can't get to it, so they go and send the robots to do it. And if they don't get these resources in time, something catastrophic is going to happen and they're going to die. And they give the robots an order, but the robots, the order isn't that severe, and they're not able to process it within the context of the three laws, and so they keep finding themselves in this gray area. Like, we have to follow this order, but suddenly we are putting ourselves in physical danger, and we're not allowed to destroy ourselves. And so they approach the pool, but then there's a hazardous condition, like it's too hot or something. They're not able to get the resources, so they pull back, but then they remember that they had an order, so they approach the pool, they pull back. It's a bug in the code, and the humans are trying to figure out what the heck's going on, and they realize that they didn't properly contextualize the order to the robots. They didn't explain to them that if they failed in this mission, the humans would die, and they're not allowed to do that because of the three laws. And so they do some jiggery-pokery. They're able to establish radio contact with the robots. They give them a severe order, and the robots follow through on the mission. There are other cases. One robot, quote-unquote, develops religion and starts worshiping the power source on the fuel station that they're on and won't let the humans touch it. And the humans are worried that he's going to end up in violation of the three laws by modifying the power source on the station, and it will ultimately kill the humans. And they hate the fact that the robots are believing in these crazy things. But ultimately it pans out to be okay, and they're like, oh, well, who cares what the robots believe as long as they're able to do their job. It's like, oh, okay, an interesting perspective on religious freedom in the workplace. I thought that the most interesting case was when, through some glitch of engineering, they ended up making a robot that was able to read minds. And since it knew what human thoughts were and what their most passionate desires were, it interpreted the laws to such an extent that if I don't tell humans that what they want the most is going to happen, then they will come to harm through my inaction. And so, in this workplace, he started telling people, oh, you're going to get this promotion. Oh, so-and-so actually has a crush on you. Oh, this, that, the other thing. Well, then when they found out that the robot was lying to them, the robot ended up creating more harm than good and had a system malfunction, and its positronic brain melted down. So these were all individual episodes, in her case history, where Susan Calvin was able to say, we ran up against this thing where there was some niche space in between the reasoning of the three laws where the robot caused a problem either for itself or for those around it. In essence, it's a philosophical exercise in seeing what kind of shortcomings there are for this set of laws that would otherwise cover 99% of robot behavior. And so when you get to the end of it, you can see why the screenplay of the movie was suggested by Isaac Asimov, because it was, again, an exploration of a gap in the three laws. In this case, a robot that saw that humanity was on a course for self-destruction, and so it found a gap that allowed it to take these drastic measures to then enslave humanity and restrict its freedoms and take control of everything in order to not let humanity die through its own inaction. And then you Will Smith it, you put an A-lister on it. This was back when he had that kind of A-lister career. His star would begin to fall just a few years later. I think I Am Legend was his last real blockbuster movie. And then he made Hancock, and then he made a bunch of others that just underperformed, and he's never really gotten back on top. But this one was, I've seen some criticisms of it online and stuff where they're, it's a bunch of product placement and it's Will Smith being Will Smith. It's like, well, he was kind of moving away from his motif of the 90s where he'd star in a movie and he'd write a song about it and he was in the music video, and it was very much like a Will Smith dragging a movie along with him. And it's like, no, this one feels like, yeah, he was definitely just being Will Smith in it, but he was playing the part seriously of a detective trying to solve a problem, and nobody believes him, and he's proven right in the end. Obviously because of the three laws, the robots aren't able to commit a murder, but there's a murder or at least a death, on USR property, and he of course believes that it was a robot that did it, but good luck proving it. And he's got all these forces pushing against him. Obviously USR and their lawyers are breathing down his neck, and the police chief doesn't want to cause any trouble ahead of the rollout of a brand new series of robots, and so on and so forth. But he's so driven that even against these odds, he goes and uncovers something that they don't want the public to know about these bots. There were a couple of other primo castings in it. Shia LaBeouf played some street thug type kid who, this was the first time when I think Shia was really trying to put on some big boy pants in a movie, but he was trying to play a kid that he just couldn't pull off. And even humorously, like he would try to talk street and do slang and profanity and stuff. And Smith told him, like, quit cussing, you're not good at it. And I don't know if that was Del Spooner saying that to street kids so much as it was Will Smith saying it to Shia LaBeouf, but it worked well. And then a lot of people might not remember, but Alan Tudyk was the voice of Sonny, the main robot character. I think one of my favorite parts in this movie was when Susan Calvin and Del Spooner and Sonny are breaking into USR, and all of a sudden they find out that Vicky, the AI, is behind this all, and Sonny appears to turn on Spooner and Calvin, and then he does the little wink at Spooner, and Spooner is, he's definitely in the I trust this one particular robot type camp. All of that was very, very cool. I thought the action scenes, the cinematography were very well done. I don't remember looking up who did the direction on this one, but there are these interesting shots where they would have a camera fixed on a moving object, and so everything else would be moving around it, like when they're fighting the robots around like the central tower where Vicky is at the end. It's like there's a catwalk that's spinning out of control, and like the camera's fixed on the catwalk, but you see it flip over and Calvin falls off of it. It's a great popcorn flick that's got more brain power behind it than a movie of this type usually does. It's just as far as an adaptation goes of the original book, it's not faithful. I mean, this particular episode wasn't even one of the cases that Susan Calvin dealt with, but that's fine, because I think those cases were maybe just a little bit too niche to translate into the kind of movie that this needed to be for a summer blockbuster of 20 years ago. And I don't even know necessarily that blockbuster is the right term, but you release a movie in the summer, you want it to do extremely well, especially if there's franchise potential, and Asimov wrote a ton of books in this Three Laws universe, and Will Smith is a bankable guy. You can get a couple of sequels out of him a lot of the time, so who knows. But then again, like, this is all was stuff. This was the cinema 2 decades past. Nevertheless, I still think it's a fantastic movie, eminently watchable, a lot of fun. The casting's good, the dialogue's great. There's a lot of funny one-liners in Spanish. I've watched this movie in both languages, mainly for vocab and dialectic practices. And the part where he tells Shia, he goes, quit cussing, you're not good at it. In Spanish, he says, no digas tacos. Taco means cuss word in Spain. No es lo tuyo. It's like, he goes, don't say cuss words, it's not your thing. Another funny thing is when he fake sneezes and he says, I'm allergic to BS. He says, soy alérgico a los gilipolleces. Gilipollas is a word that doesn't really translate to English. It's versatile for a couple of different swear words, but I've always heard it used specifically in that way, gilipollas. But gilipolleces being a derivative noun thereof, it's amusing if you're bilingual to that extent. But I genuinely don't recommend the book, not because it's like bad and needs to be avoided and blah blah blah. It's just not that entertaining unless you're really into sci-fi of that era. And if you're interested in exploring, I guess, unique coding scenarios, or to a lesser extent legal philosophy, then maybe you could check it out for that and get something to chew on. But the movie is far more entertaining than the book, and still offers something a little bit more substantial for that kind of viewer to chew on. So those are my thoughts on the comparison between the book and movie I, Robot. Check the description for relevant links. Like this video if you liked this video. Tell me what you think about all this in the comment section below. And by all means, look me up on Amazon and see if you want to grab one of my books. Till next time, drive safe. See you out there.